You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Holloway. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. We've got a great show lined up for you this week. We're going to be talking about Obamacare Light and how it seems to have stalled on the table at the House. If you listen carefully, you can actually hear the sound of about 216 representatives running around in circles and crying. In addition to that, we're going to talk a little bit about precocious conservakids. Quite possibly one of the most condescending articles I've ever read. We're going to go into further detail with a Forbes article that gets down to the nuts and bolts of the Paul Ryan fix to the Obamacare disaster. And we're going to review a recent article from Gizmodo, of all places. Aren't they a consumer electronics magazine? What are they doing talking about politics? You're not going to like where this goes. All that and more coming up this hour on the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm Matt Holloway. Today is March 23rd, year of our Lord 2017, and it's looking like the House has decided to postpone its vote on the so-called American Health Care Act, a.k.a. Obamacare Light, a.k.a. Ryan Care, a.k.a. Trump Care. This thing's got enough nicknames. It's designed to replace Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. However, it has failed to secure sufficient votes in order to beat that House vote today. So, they've gone ahead and kicked the can down the road. We don't know quite how long for. According to Tragoin Phillips at The Blaze, there are last-minute efforts that are underway at the White House to get the conservative wing of the party on board, but as many sources have reported, such as Fox News, the House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows... Sorry about that. House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows said, "We have not gotten enough of our members to get to yes at this point under what we have now." So, here's where we sit. Obamacare Light. Not looking like it's going to get through anytime soon. Now, President Trump has apparently been meeting inside the cabinet room with Freedom Caucus members to try to rally conservatives to the cause, and he also tweeted urging supporters to call their representatives to back the bill. That's according to Fox News's, that's just their news desk. Okay. So, are you excited to jump on board with Obamacare Light? Because I can tell you for sure that I'm not. I can tell you that I found some deep problems with the new Obamacare replacement. But that's not one of the reasons that I brought you on today, that I wanted to have this discussion with you that we have every week. What I wanted to talk to you about this week is that this is to be expected. I think we're so used to 8 years of just the Democratic Party ramming whatever they want, legislatively speaking, down our throats, that we just figure, that's the bill, we got to pass the bill, it's got to be passed as is. You know, precisely what the Paul Ryan crew is telling the rest of the Republican Party. But that's not what our founders had in mind when they designed our legislative system, when they designed our government as a whole. There's supposed to be consultation across the board. A bill's supposed to go through many, many iterations. There's the House side, there's the Senate side, there's amendments, there's riders. What we're looking at here is by no means the finished product of our Congress's efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. So I'm going to give really the unpopular stance of let's sit back and watch. Let's wait and see what happens here. Because our Freedom Caucus is going to have some of their way on this. There are several different bills floating around the Senate right now, such as the Rand Paul authored recommendation. I'm certain that components of that bill are going to be worked into this on reconciliation. You see, since the House is taking the budgetary method in order to make this work, it means it starts at the House and then it moves to the Senate, but the Senate still gets their say. And as we know, the bill as it stands is pretty much dead on arrival in the Senate. So this is not going to be the big defining moment of the repeal and replace of Obamacare, folks. As much as Paul Ryan wants this to be his grand moment, and as of this hour, 5:14 p.m. Pacific time on March 23rd, it looks more like a grand face plant. Much ado about nothing. We're nowhere near ready to start cheering or jeering this plan. And, you know, I'm guilty. Last week or two, I had my good friend K.E. Dean on, and we talked about repeal, not replace. And you know what? That's still where I am today. I am still in the camp that we need to completely gut and repeal everything about the Affordable Care Act, every last thing, and then start from square one with real, comprehensive health reform in this country. And I'm not talking about a single-payer plan. I'm not talking about socialized medicine. I'm talking about real tort reform that will reduce the malpractice insurance costs to medical providers, which will in turn reduce the overall cost of health care in this country. It'll reduce the burden on hospitals, doctors' offices, clinics, specialists, and the amount of insurance that they need to cover themselves. What this does produce is the uncomfortable conversation of how much is a human life worth. So if I die on the table, knocking wood furiously, how much is my family compensated for my death if it's due to medical malpractice? And that's a real uncomfortable conversation that we need to have as a culture. But we need to have it, because if we don't, then we wind up in this place of socialized medicine, where the costs of maintaining a medical practice have become so overwhelming and so unrealistic that it's not possible. I'm kind of ranting and raving here, but I'm going to ask, when's the last time you went to a small town general practitioner? An old-fashioned MD, the grizzled old town doctor? If you have, count yourself lucky, because you're among the fortunate few. They're going out of business everywhere. It's no longer financially feasible for a medical student to get out of college as a doctor. They've earned their doctorate, and open up a solo practice in small town America. It can't be done. So what happens is these doctors will join large group practices or large corporations, which can serve as buffers to help them handle the incredible burden of malpractice insurance. Unfortunately, in these situations, the experience of the patient commonly suffers, and costs are astronomically high. And it starts a spiral where at the end the government has to step in just to tackle the overwhelming cost of care. So we need to make real changes. We need to talk about real tort reform. And I know everybody's going to jump on me and say, you know, if you check the text of the bill, there are limits placed on how much people can... Yeah, that's not real tort reform. We need to put a hard cap on the maximum a doctor or a corporation can be sued if you die under their care, or if I die under their care. And it has to be realistic and reasonable. Now, can it be a sliding scale based on the impact to the family? Sure. But it needs to be codified. It needs to be real. And then from there, once we have true tort reform in place, there are a number of additional steps that we can take to reform healthcare. We can take the additional steps of making it so that pre-existing conditions do not interfere with your insurability. Because at that point, healthcare will have become affordable enough where insurance doesn't have to insure for as much. That reduces the risk burden on insurance companies nationwide. So the risk pool is affected positively in that fashion. Where even if the insurance company has to make a catastrophic payout, it's still a reasonably catastrophic payout. So that's how you bring in costs. That's how you rein in the cost of healthcare and access to healthcare in this country. Not through big government, but by getting government out of the way and by reducing the ridiculously high litigation numbers for medical malpractice. And I also want to argue how glaringly inconsistent malpractice suits are. There are very few guidelines that judges can follow in existing jurisprudence on how much to award for a malpractice suit. This is how we reform healthcare in the United States. I'm not a doctor. I'm a thinker. And I paid a lot of medical bills. Still drowning in them from the birth of my wonderful twin sons. I'm fairly certain we still owe about $5,000 on that. I digress, though. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about an article that I read from townhall.com by Kurt Schlichter. I'm sure Kurt's a cool guy, but this one boiled my blood a little bit. We'll get back to that here when the HoloNet returns on the Lanterns Radio Network. Hey everybody, Matt Holloway here. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about an amazing group of patriot entrepreneurs. Hot Pants LLC of Arizona is a welding, fabrication, and metallurgy company specializing in display weaponry and shields. A veteran-owned and operated company, they create interesting items inspired by their customers' ideas, as well as beautiful custom pieces of their own design. They're certified welders, credentialed by the Arizona Automotive Institute and Tidewater Community College, with a background experience from the U.S. military and the shipping industry. Hot Pants specializes in creating weaponry for cosplay, anime, video games, and the zombie apocalypse. No matter what your imagination can dream up, they can create a slew of interesting, creative weapons and shields, ideal for any costume or outfit. If you're engrossed in the world of video games or role-playing, let them arm your character with unique, high-quality weapons. You won't be disappointed by their artistry and attention to detail. Give them a call today at 602-900-6856. That's 602-900-6856. Order online at www.hotpantsmetal.com. That's HOTTPANTS metal.com. Also there on Facebook at facebook.com/hotpantsllc.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
And we're back from the break. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm Matt Holloway. Now, before we move on to our next topic, I did want to cap off that according to malpracticecenter.com, and I'll provide the link to this in the show notes, there are 33 separate sets of damage caps in medical malpractice lawsuits. So 33 states out of the 50, Arizona, my home state, not being one of them, provide a guideline or a cap to how much you can sue for medical malpractice and wrongful death. Okay? And they range wildly. Alaska, for example, $250,000 for non-economic damages, bumped up to $400,000 in cases that involve severe impairment or higher than 70%, and for wrongful death. Colorado, $1 million cap in overall amount of compensation that the patient can receive for medical expenses, non-economic damages. Solely non-economic damages is $300,000. These are all over the board. Maryland, $770,000 with a cap increase set as $15,000 per year. What we need is a nationwide consistent damage cap. True tort reform that cuts across the board. I mean, on a federal level, we have about a $250,000 cap on non-economic, but that doesn't cover all instances here. The amount of insurance that a doctor has to maintain is insane to cover all of these different possibilities, especially if they practice in multiple states. Most doctors don't, but most major medical facilities do. Think about that. All right, so moving right along. We're going to come to this article now on townhall.com by Kurt Schlichter. It's actually an opinion column by Kurt, and this one got my blood boiling a little bit. He starts out, enough of the precocious conservakids. For some unfathomable reason, conservatives always seem to get excited when a moderately articulate post-puberty pundit comes along. Wow, wait a hang on. Post-puberty pundit. Nice alliteration. Comes along and parrots some simulacrum of conservative doctrine, except it almost always ends up like when my retriever corgi mix tries to walk on her stubby back legs and we gasp in delight. Look, Bitey thinks she's people. Now I want to add, top of this is a big picture of Tommy Lahren from The Blaze. Now, Tommy and I don't agree on a lot of things, but I don't think that's right. I mean, kind of abstractly comparing Tommy Lahren to your corgi retriever mix, that's kind of messed up, dude. But the precocious conservakids, and you know, Schlichter, according to this, is a former serviceman, and I thank him for his service. But he goes on to cite 13-year-old Jonathan Crone, who wowed at the 2009 CPAC, C.J. Pearson, a teen sensation who liked conservatism, then decided that he liked Trump. And then he gets into a long tear about Tommy Lahren, of course, and her recent appearance on The View. Now, I'm not going to beat the ever-loving daylights out of this. I actually posted an article up on lanterns.buzz if you want to check it out. I actually called it, It's Not About Tommy, It's About Life and the Constitution, because we have to stick to our principles in arguments like this, okay? We have to stick to constitutionalism and what conservatism really means. And at the end of the day, I get that people feel very, very strongly about the abortion question. I'm pro-life. 100% pro-life. I became pro-life through an evolution of my principles and of my understanding. And you know what? When I was 24 years old, I was not as conservative as I am now at 30. Because my views, my worldview are informed by three things. My belief in Christ, my belief in the Constitution and in our American culture, and my being a father. Those are the three major factors that contribute to my conservative beliefs. Now, to any woman who's ever suffered from a miscarriage or a stillbirth, and to any man or woman or family member who stood by their side through this, you'll be able to understand. That's one of those moments where I cemented my pro-life stance. The other moments were when I held each of my 3 baby boys in my arms for the first time. Specifically, one thing that informed my pro-life beliefs, I should say my anti-murder beliefs more, were with my youngest 2 sons. I mentioned earlier on another show that they were a difficult pregnancy for my wife, and she's a trooper. And she had to go through repeated ultrasounds over and over and over and over and over again, 3 times a week sometimes, because there was a risk of a terrible disorder known as twin-to-twin transfusion, where one twin is getting more nourishment from the placenta than the other, and there's a risk that one of the babies could be lost, and that then the other baby could also be lost due to uterotoxicity, and could potentially get brain damage if they survive. And it's just a dreadful, dreadful disorder. Thank God, both Daniel and Nicholas were born perfectly normal, happy, healthy baby boys, and Amy was just fine. But going through that worry, and realizing that in some states, at the week that they were born, it would still be legal for them to be aborted, shook me to my very core. Shook me hard when I held those little baby boys in my hands, and Nicholas in particular was smaller than his brother, and he was so tiny. And looked so delicate when he was first born. Those first couple of weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit brought me closer to God, and also clarified my belief in a pro-life stance and that abortion is wrong. So I've gotten a little bit off topic, but to bring it on back, the precocious conservatives or conservakids. Now, I'm a little older, like I said. I'm not 24 years old. I'm 30 this year. But I'm a millennial. I was born in 1986. A millennial is anybody that falls between 1979 and 1989 by most estimates. Some say 1982 to 1988. That's okay, too. It's people that came of age with the turn of the 21st century. In the year 2000, I was in high school. And I will tell you that, as I said, my conservatism was an evolution over time. And I was more liberal when I was a younger man. So with age does come a greater grasp and a greater understanding. Now, there's a quote out there that's often falsely attributed to Sir Winston Churchill, and it actually is a Monsieur Batby quoting the statesman Sir Edmund Burke, who was noted for his support of the American Revolution but condemned the French Revolution. And Monsieur Batby said, "He who is not a Republican at 20 compels one to doubt the generosity of his heart, but he who after 30 persists compels one to doubt the soundness of his mind." Now, translated for a younger audience, that's not to be a Republican at 20 is proof of want of heart. To be one at 30 is proof of want of head. So there's a lot of variations of this quote that are running around. But to say that your political consciousness is not an evolution attached to your age and your maturity is a falsehood. And also to wrap all of millennials into a single understanding, to just paint all millennials with such a broad brush, also demonstrates a frightful lack of understanding. I was lucky enough to actually be born into a rather conservative household, albeit a conservative household in New Jersey. So to some of my relatives, I'm off the deep end right wing. I'm very conservative. I've been called an ideologue. And, I wear that pretty proudly around Thanksgiving time. But nonetheless, for people who did not grow up in a conservative household, for millennials like me who did not have that benefit, I would say, you have to realize that absolutely everything in their lives was working against them having conservative or libertarian even mindsets or any kind of liberty-based mindset, because the school system is rigged to churn out liberals at this stage. The college system is completely rigged to churn out liberals. The biggest problem that the Republican Party has is it's going to be dead in 30 years. And I know that's a big splash of cold water, and I've said it before, and I'm going to keep on saying it until somebody actually pays bloody attention, because you cannot continually disenfranchise millennials like this. You can't talk down to millennials like this and expect to make progress towards conservative goals. Because eventually, all of your tried and tested, quote-unquote, true conservatives are going to straight up drop dead. And they're churning out more liberals every day. So in order to start turning this ship around, what I would say to my elder conservatives is you need to start counseling your younger conservatives, not running them down or talking down to them via column posts like this or lighting somebody on fire on Twitter because they espouse a somewhat different view. Maybe their worldview hasn't come around to that yet. Maybe that person shouldn't be your standard bearer for conservatism. That's okay. But you have to be conscious of the fact that everyone is going to get to their understanding of what conservatism is in their own time. And forcing them any faster is going to create an issue. And if we divide ourselves within our own political group, within our own political understanding, then we're never going to take back anything in this nation. We're never going to be the shining city on a hill. We have to work together to unite conservatives on the battlefield of ideas and to be lanterns to others, shining the light of truth. Now we're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about an article that appeared in Gizmodo just the other day regarding the electronics ban issued jointly by both the White House and 10 Downing Street. I'm Matt Holloway. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, this is Matt Holloway, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. It's been exciting putting this together for you, and I'm looking forward to many more to come. I did want to let you know that in setting up the HoloNet and getting everything launched here, we've gone ahead and set up a page on Patreon.com. Now, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a website that's similar to other crowdfunding sources that allows you to support on a month-to-month basis those sources, those artists, and those groups that you really care about and that you're passionate about. And I hope that we can ignite passion in a lot of people to become more involved in the political process, and also to become involved in the conversation and to keep that political dialogue alive. So I'd like to humbly ask you today to consider becoming a patron of the HoloNet on Patreon.com, and you can access that at Patreon.com/theHoloNet. We have various levels of patronage. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, which unlocks exclusive content for the Patreon community, such as a feed of patron-only content. Then you have a $5 option, which gives you behind-the-scenes access to blog about the different inspirations that we have. It'll give you access to patrons-only polling. And then we have a $10 option, which gives you a signed digital poster, plus everything else. $20 option, which gives you name in the credits on the site, and all other rewards. And we even have a segment sponsor package available on Patreon, which is $125 a month, which entitles you and your business to a 60-second ad as a segment sponsor during the podcast, of course, subject to content approval. So if you would like to become a patron of the HoloNet, we would be greatly thankful to you, and it's going to go toward a solid cause of generating this sort of millennial constitutional conservative content that is so lacking in our media today. So thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for being a part of the HoloNet. Here we hold the line against the night, and the millennial conservative resistance begins here.
You are listening to the Lanterns Radio Network, where Americans come together to illuminate the truth. Turn it up loud and proud until the knob breaks off. Lanterns, illuminating the truth.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
And we're back on the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. You can find us online at holonet.lanterns.buzz, theholonet.blogspot.com if you want to see some of our written content as well. Of course, our stories always grace the cover and banner of Lanterns.buzz, where they've been kind enough to make yours truly a featured columnist. Which is always fantastic. You can tweet me at Matt D. Holloway or at The HoloNet, and I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/TheHoloNet. So in case you were wondering where to find me on social media, that's where. So now, we're going to talk a little bit about this article that came out from Gizmodo that has a couple of gears turning. You don't usually expect to see a whole lot of politically minded work coming from Gizmodo. Gizmodo is a blog page that is primarily obsessed with electronics and technology and the future. It's a futurist page. I mean, that's why I read them. But a recent article came out yesterday, just about noon, from Adam Clark Estes, filed under our tiny-handed strongman as a category, is Trump's electronics ban on airplanes makes less sense every day. Okay? So, according to Estes, in a little less than 72 hours, Trump's administration the Trump administration's ban on allowing electronic devices larger than a smartphone in the cabins of planes flying from Middle Eastern airports will take effect. When the policy was announced, it was entirely unclear what was prompting the seemingly arbitrary list of airports that would be affected, and even more unclear if the policy would actually improve security. At first glance, newly reported details seem to offer some clarity, but they actually just obfuscate the reasoning behind the ban even more. A flurry of reports Tuesday night claim that the ban follows a possible threat that ISIS, or maybe Al-Qaeda, or both, who knows, is developing explosives the size of a laptop battery. Now, just on its face, doesn't that make sense? Okay, we find out that Al-Qaeda or ISIS is developing a bomb that's the size of a laptop battery. We've received a credible threat through our intelligence community, and we're acting accordingly. Okay? There's no word that this is going to be a permanent ban or an ongoing ban. It could be temporary for all we know. It could be limited to a specific time frame regarding a specific threat. Now, here's the kicker. Shortly, just hours after President Trump announced this ban, or the administration announced this ban, a similar one was enacted by 10 Downing Street in the UK. What also happened yesterday in the UK? A terrorist attack on the Houses of Parliament at Westminster Palace. We now know that a single assailant, man in his 50s, one Khalid Massoud, 52 years old according to the New York Times, plowed his 4x4 through several barricades into a crowded entrance to the Parliament building, striking some 40-some-odd people, of whom I believe at least 12 now dead, including Mr. Khalid Massoud himself, who was gunned down by London police responding to the stabbing death of one of their officers. So let's put this into perspective for Gizmodo, okay? We have an attack here very similar to the attack that was launched on Nice. We have a similar attack which appears to have been thwarted in Belgium, where it's believed that a vehicle was going to drive into a crowded market. And by the way, ISIS has claimed responsibility for the attack in London. I suspect they will likely claim similar responsibility for the aborted attack in Belgium. So let's think about this. The White House and our intelligence sources discover a credible threat involving a small explosive approximately the size of a laptop battery. We share that information through co-intelligence with our counterparts in the UK. Both governments take action to prevent this, and a series of considerably lower tech attacks take place in two major capitals in Europe, London and Belgium. What this strikes me as is a potentially coordinated attack, wherein we would have low-tech attacks combined with a higher-risk, higher-tech attack. And I believe that in this situation, the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom have acted appropriately. Now, outlets like Gizmodo, apparently, are all too happy to jump on this bandwagon, citing serious inconsistencies with the airports, and, by the way, pulling from James Fallow's latest Atlantic column for a great quote, saying, "The inevitability of this moment when a new president says, 'Trust me,' is why so many veteran officials have worried about Donald Trump's habit of incessantly telling instantly disprovable lies. Some of the lies don't really matter. Biggest inaugural crowd ever, when photos showed it was comparatively small. Some of them obviously would matter if they were true. Millions of illegal voters, wiretapped by Obama," which, by the way, seems to have at least been partially vindicated by the head of the Intelligence Committee. Yeah, we'll get back to Nunez. Thus the problem. If the administration will lie about facts where the contradictory evidence is in plain sight, how can we possibly believe them on anything else? Well, what I'm going to say is I do believe them on this. Why? Because the timing is too close to be coincidental. And I know people are going to scream post hoc ergo propter hoc at me for this. But when you see the UK reveal a similar policy in an almost identical move, and we do know that the British authorities communicated with the United States before implementing their move, that tells me that there has been very likely a credible threat that has been vetted by not only American sources here, but also by the Ministry of of Information in the Ministry of Defense in the UK. MI6, whatever you want to pull out of your James Bond hat. British intelligence, we'll just say, has corroborated this, and that's why we have this result of electronics coming to the U.S. From 8 Muslim countries being banned and 6 Muslim countries from the UK. So let's put this into perspective for our good friends at Gizmodo. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You get one report and you act on it, you can question that. When you get 2 reports from 2 credible sources and you act on it, and then you see that similar attacks have taken place in other capitals of the world within the same time frame, that's a little bit too much to chalk up to coincidence. Okay? The Gizmodo piece ends saying, all this leaves the average American citizen in a very weird position. On one hand, Trump is a serial liar, which seems to have little to do with an article ostensibly about electronics. It's hard to believe that this new policy is rooted in anything other than the president's tired tactic of fear-mongering based on 0 facts. Despite that demonstrably the UK has received and acted on the same facts. On the other hand, terrorist attacks are scary, and it's been historically difficult to separate fact from fear. If you confuse people enough, however, they're bound to be afraid no matter what. We'll see what the coming days bring. Perhaps facts will emerge. More confusion seems like a better bet. So I think in this situation, it might have been a little bit better for Gizmodo to just hold what they had and not jump the gun on this one. Because you look a shade premature when you release a piece like this, and shortly thereafter, there are several terrorist attacks abroad. Makes you look just a mite eager to overly criticize an administration that, judged by your category system of our tiny-handed strongman, you clearly have a distaste for. Maybe you stick to the electronics. That's just my thought. Alright, so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up with a little bit about the CBO's scoring on the GOP Obamacare replacement, and a couple more items here that are hitting the news. You're listening to the HoloNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
You're listening to the HoloNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
All right, folks, welcome back. You're listening to the HoloNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. I'm Matt Holloway. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the CBO analysis from Forbes magazine, but we have some new news just in from Lanterns. We're taking a look at an article here from The Hill. It appears that President Trump has threatened to leave Obamacare in place if the repeal bill fails. Furthermore, according to Politico, President Trump has demanded a Friday vote, even as the Republican Party continues to attempt to whip the votes. So I'm going to include links to these two stories in the show notes as well. So it appears that there will be a vote on the replacement for the Affordable Care Act, come hell or high water. Now, this move by Trump and Ryan is an enormous gamble, according to Rachel Bade, Kyle Cheney, and Josh Dowsey, wow, full court press, at Politico. And it could risk a glaring embarrassment for the new president and House Speaker, and could undermine other parts of the GOP legislative agenda, including tax reform. Now, this really could set the standard for how this government proceeds, how President Trump proceeds, and how the Republican control of Congress proceeds, and could significantly endanger the chances to hold on to the House and the Senate in the 2018 election. If this government should fail to repeal Obamacare in a satisfactory manner, it will shatter the faith of conservatives in this government, who have been told over and over and over again for the past 6 years that we would repeal Obamacare if we got a president into the White House who would sign it. So my whole conceit is this. Why has the House and Senate not represented the very same bill that both houses agreed to and put on President Barack Obama's desk last, which repealed Obamacare clean? Why hasn't this been done? But as I said earlier, what this is going to break down to is this is going to break down to compromise. This is going to break down to members of the House and members of the Senate presenting different variations on a theme, coming together to form a coalition bill, a compromise bill that meets the requirements of the Freedom Caucus and also meets the requirement of your blue state Republicans who are under significant threat of being ousted this next 2018 term in states where the Democratic Party is gearing up and spoiling for a fight using the ammunition of liberal outrage at President Trump. So these are congressmen and women who are bracing themselves for the storm, who need the full strength of the United Republican Party behind them. So yes, we are going to see a bill come through. We are going to see a bill pass, I believe. And it's probably going to have features of what everybody wants, but I don't think it's going to be a cold, clean repeal of Obamacare the way I would prefer it, and the way many conservatives would prefer it, and many members of the Freedom Caucus. I believe it's going to still share many of the aspects that we don't like. I would sincerely hope that it drops the individual mandate, that we see a withdrawal of the Medicare expansion, and that we step back from the brink of fully socialized single-payer medicine in this country and can gradually work this back down to a free market solution. Because I think that's what it's going to take. You can't simply drop everybody off of the Obamacare rolls and expect it to be okay. There has to be a ramp down. There has to be a drawdown of it to an eventual sunset, and to a handoff to a true private sector solution for American healthcare. So I'm going to tie this all together. This has been a rough week for conservatives. It's been a rough week for millennial conservatives. And I can't wait to see how it all turns out. But we've got Tomi Lahren of The Blaze, who goes on The View and declares herself as pro-choice and seems to suffer some pretty significant blowback as a result of it. That's been widely reported on lanterns.buzz, among other sources. We have the ongoing the ongoing efforts to confirm Justice Neil Gorsuch, and I've been watching this all week, guys. I didn't do a segment on it because it's not done yet, and I want to do kind of a greatest hits. But I'm really excited about Neil Gorsuch as a Supreme Court Justice. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be exactly what the bench has needed for a long time. A justice truly committed to the law. Now we have all this business about Obamacare Light, a.k.a. Trump Care, a.k.a. Ryan Care. And how it seems that nobody's really going to get what they want out of it. The solution is this. We have to be uniters, not dividers. If you're older than me, and you don't like the fact that I said the Republican Party is going to drop dead in 30 years, then do something to prevent it. Reach out to millennial conservatives near you, to your children, your nieces, your nephews, your grandkids. And let's work together. Let's work hard to find that common ground. Because if we can't bring together our own caucus, as it were, if we can't bring together the more moderate Republicans and the more conservative Republicans on our key core principles of a constitutional republic based on the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States, and the writings of our founders, Federalist Papers, for example, then how can we possibly expect to convince people on the other side of the aisle that our vision, the founders' vision of America, is right and just, if we can't convince those who are of similar mind already? So I know there's a lot of reaction out there to Tomi Lahren. And it makes for great radio. It makes for a lot of clicks and a lot of articles. But we can't be too quick to push away our own party. Trumpers, never Trumpers. Freedom Caucus, the establishment. Millennial conservatives. Gen X and baby boomer conservatives. We have to find ways to come together and be lanterns for another, to shine forth the truth and stand together on the battlefield of ideas for our shared principles and for the future of our nation. Now, if you like the show, please like, share on Facebook, on Twitter, on SoundCloud, on Spreaker. You can listen to us on Spreaker, iTunes, Play.fm, SoundCloud as well, like I mentioned. You can always check out theholonet.blogspot.com, lanterns.buzz. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/theholonet. You can tweet at theholonet or at Matt D. Holloway. Here on the Holonet, we hold the line against the night. And the millennial conservative resistance begins right here, right now, with you. Thank you as always for listening. Good night, and God bless.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.